My sermon today is a response to our story, and I want to thank Ann McAllister for delivering that so beautifully this morning. Your order of service says that our worship associate is Lynn Kendall, who is in our choir this morning, but Ann is actually our worship associate this morning. My words today are titled, What It Means to Offer Sanctuary. Our story today offers many things I love. First and foremost, I love the story of William and Ellen Craft, their ingenuity, their creativity, as well as their raw physical courage. I love that Ellen traversed boundaries of both race and gender in crafting a successful disguise. In this, she was every ounce the shapeshifter, a worthy incarnation of Esu Elegbara, the Yoruba trickster god who frequently subverted such cultural norms in legend. And I love that William, in some sort of weird jujitsu, passes essentially as himself, a black male slave hidden in plain sight. The cunning beauty for me in the Crafts story is the delicious irony that white people's expectations about what is possible for people of color, for women, is so wholly used against their norms and institutions to demonstrate the opposite. The Crafts defy stereotype. They can clearly do everything that is needed for their escape and ultimately their livelihood. Yes, they were in terrible peril. What if someone had discovered their true identities? And yet, they passed 1,000 miles for freedom. No wonder they were the toast of Boston. Their story and Ellen's portrait circulating widely in the press many long years before they managed to write and publish their book. Maybe most of all, I love that William and Ellen were members of Theodore Parker's congregation. I studied the Crafts in grad school. They make an important appearance in my dissertation, but I didn't know until just a few weeks ago that we could legitimately claim them as part of our own tradition. This gives me a heady pride. I don't know whether their Unitarianism went with them into England. I don't know how deeply it was written on their hearts, but the record does show that for a time at least, they joined us. What a mitzvah, what a blessing for our community that their legacy touches our own in this way. I also love the story of Theodore Parker, his sense of conscience and his outrage at a law that demands his complicity in an odious institution, his constancy and his courage as an ally, facing down not only the slave catchers, but also the government, indeed the President of the United States, and instructing those around him in their duty. I love this part of the story. This is the you I hope to be, though I also know I fail in this. Parker did everything he could with the position he held in the world. I'm sure he did it imperfectly. I know he made mistakes we don't see here in Polly Peterson's version of this story. For good and ill, each of us is a product of our times. No one gets to escape this. Even so, Parker's heroism shines brightly. I love that this is a story of interfaith cooperation. I think it's important to note that Lewis Hayden was not a Unitarian or a Universalist, but an African Methodist Episcopal. Hayden had made his own escape from slavery in Kentucky in 1844, making his way with his family first to Detroit, then Canada, then to Boston in 1846, in time to help the Crafts. Hayden was a clothier and a jeweler, and the home he and his wife Harriet shared offered sanctuary to many, many people who had escaped slavery. It's on the Black History Trail in Boston, so when our Boston Bound group travels there this coming May, we'll see it. Hayden was also a messenger for the Massachusetts Secretary of State's office and ultimately a representative in the Massachusetts legislature. He was also a Freemason and wrote several books advocating for the integration of that organization. I also love that not every Unitarian in this story is a hero. President Millard Fillmore is, in this story, the UU I fear I am. Too conciliatory, too accommodating, not enough moved by his own convictions. I see him as sort of the Cornelius Fudge of this story. Polly Peterson is generous in suggesting that the era he presided over was a necessary evil, perhaps too generous. It doesn't rest easily with me that people in our UU history were compliant with the institution of slavery, and it shouldn't. It should tug at all our consciences. While we should always bear in mind that our denomination's relationship to our racist culture has always been fraught. We have too often conformed to its dictates, consciously and unconsciously. While I love the role of the Vigilance Committee in this story, sending the slave catchers packing, what it evokes most for me is the need for vigilance in my own heart. May I be the Crafts, may I be Theodore Parker, may I be the Haydens, offering sanctuary to those urgently in need. And if I have been President Fillmore, or worse, may I learn to do better and be better. But as I think about the nuances of this story, another important lesson comes from something it only touches on. Theodore Parker had a crucial role to play, but he didn't do it alone. The story tells us that the Crafts became members of Parker's congregation. His congregation was a sanctuary for the Crafts. I pray they were ready for this role, and at the same time, I know fundamentally they weren't entirely ready. How could they be? They were people of their time as we are of ours. Our congregation is already very engaged in matters of social justice. Could we do more? Absolutely. And we should. But as we deepen our work with those who most need it, the homeless, the refugee, the prisoner, the survivor, the stranger at our door, let us also strive to become more loving with one another. Let us always bear in mind one another's struggles. As the stranger in need enters and becomes one of us, let us remember that there are and have always been those in need among us. When we stumble, let us reach out to one another in love. When we err, let us repair, reconcile, and begin anew. My prayer, my earnest wish, is that we learn to love one another so deeply that we make a sanctuary of our love that others want to seek rest in. May our love for one another offer a bright beacon to passers-by, saying, yes, here is your safe place. Rest in us a while. Find your sanctuary here.